The MP for Nkwanta North, John Oti Bless, denies any wrongdoing in last week's riots that occurred in the area. Now to come, the 2013 World Health Report tips Accra as Africa's fastest growing city by 2020. Stay tuned for the meaning of this, what this could mean for our economy. I'll be back with details of these stories and many more in a bit. If you've been on, you've seen a battle of legal words which began this morning at the Supreme Court when 4 lead counsel in the presidential election petition appeared before the 9 judges to lock horns to justify why President John Dramani Mahama should or should not be maintained as leader of the nation. Now, the address is focused on protecting the interests of the petitioners who want President Mahama deposed on the strength of the 1992 Constitution and that of President Mahama, who was declared winner of the December 7 and 8, 2012 presidential polls. Now, lawyers for the conductor of the polls, the Electoral Commission and the National Democratic Congress are praying the courts to affirm the EC's declaration of President Mahama as the winner of the presidential election, while counsel for President Mahama is also seeking to implore the courts to maintain the status. Now, barring any last-minute hitches, the oral advocacy will mark the last legal hurdle to pave the way for the delivery of the court's judgment in the presidential election petition. And as you saw, Tony Leader, counsel for the first respondent, President Mahama, was the first to deliver his oral address. And let's go over to the court at the moment where my colleague Eric Curtis Howard is, and he's joining us by telephone. Hello, Eric.
Yeah, come in. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you. What more can you tell us about today?
Okay, as you are aware, the lawyers have finished with their legal addresses, and they're still waiting for the court to. The date has been set. We know that it's on the 29th of August. It's a Friday, and on that day, the ruling will be given, and we'll know whether, as to the election petition hearing that was brought forward by the petitioners, whether they had a case or they didn't have a case. So that will be a landmark case, landmark ruling in the country. But for now, as I can speak to you, it was a packed courtroom today. It was a packed situation at the court. The police were here in their numbers as usual. Supporters from the various political parties were also here. They all wanted to listen to the addresses of the lawyers to find out how the whole situation went, how it went, what next and everything. So court was exciting today. And now that the addresses have closed, everybody, all the lawyers are, kind of patting themselves on their back and they're waiting. Others are quite in a pensive mood. Others who are, everybody's saying they have a case. So this is how the situation here at the moment is coming in.
Right. I'm sure there's a sense of relief, even though we still need to wait to expect the verdict. Would you say so?
For some people, it's a kind of disappointment because they actually expected that within the next 14 days, the judges would have just come about. It looks like we're coming back on the 14th. Judges say we're coming back on the 14th, where the court will address the legal counsel, after which the date for the ruling. But all the same, it's really for both parties. They're speaking to some of the lawyers this morning, having pictures with them. They said they all have a case. Everyone you speak to believes in his or her case, believes that he has presented a solid case in court to win this case. So it's like a ding-dong, but it is up to the judges to come up with a ruling in the interest of the nation. But so far, so good. It's been a fruitful day in court. Right. Everything has been successful. The lawyers and everybody, they're smiling. As I speak to you now, they're filing out of the courtroom, and they are coming to have the media session, the interviews with the media here. So it's as usual, their usual media session. Everybody, you can see them smiling. Everybody having their own chit-chat, trying to see the situation and everything. So for them, they've won the case already. Each one has his own
interpretation of what should happen,
of what transpired. So it's been like that right now. So at the moment, we are just waiting for the lawyers to come out, and the spokesperson for both the petitioners and the respondents, that's Gloria Kufu and Nana Sudazi, to come out to just tell us so far what their expectations are when the judges, how today's hearing went, whether they think they actually brought forward their case. So that's the moment we're doing here. So they're just having their own discussion in small groups, discussing the situation. So we'll just let the US know the latest situation.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But help us get the dates right. On August 14, there'll be a hearing where the justices will address counsel. Is that it?
Yes, that's the situation. On August 14, the justices will address the legal counsel. They will tell them what. I can't really tell them what they will be saying.
Right.
I don't really. But after that, on the 29th, that's the date for the ruling.
For the ruling. Thank you very much, Eric. Eric Curtis Howard is my colleague, and he joined us from the Supreme Court. We understand that parties in this case addressing members of the press. We'll bring you updates on that issue as well. But moving on quickly, but in relation to the Supreme Court and the verdicts that we are all expectant of, the security services early this morning has been on a route march exercise to assure the public that they are well equipped to deal with possible outbreak of violence following the Supreme Court's judgment on the disputed elections, comprising the various units of the Ghana Armed Forces, the police service, among others. The security agencies are serving warning to youth groups and others who will want to engage in violence to protect judges' ruling that they are ready to crack down on them. Now, Joy News' Esther Madigu, who was with the security personnel, said they moved through some principal streets of Accra to show their preparedness for the task ahead.
An important segment of our team training activities to enhance our operational readiness. Let me further emphasize that as security personnel, our loyalty is first and foremost to the state. This requires that we remain above the political fray at all times. The ongoing election petition at the Supreme Court demonstrates our collective determination and commitment as a nation to resolving our differences and disagreements through civilized rather than primitive means of violence and strife. We should all go to the next critical step of accepting the verdict of the Supreme Court, whichever way it goes, and forge ahead together as one people with a common destiny and goal.
So is this something that you've been doing, or this is the first time?
It is periodic. I remember before the election we had one, and we do it quite periodically, and as and when the need arises, we come together as a security one body of security agencies, and it enables us foster a closer relationship amongst ourselves. You see.
Now, the Islamic Peace and Security Council of Ghana has appealed to political leaders and their supporters to refrain from passing comments that could have adverse effects on the election petition before the Supreme Court. Alhaji Kuzaima Mohammed Osman, Executive Secretary of IPOSEC, also cautioned the political parties not to say anything prejudicial to the court's verdict or opt for violence protests. In a press statement, he said Ghana has accepted to be guided by democratic principles that enjoin people interested in political leadership to go through voting and those not satisfied of the outcome to go to court. Alhaji Osman expressed the belief that both the governing National Democratic Congress and the leading opposition New Patriotic Party would abide by the Supreme Court's decision, whichever way it goes. Now, majority of Ghanaians have expressed their readiness to pay higher taxes if only government will be transparent about how it uses the tax revenue, according to the Center for Democratic Development's Afrobarometer survey report on citizens' views on taxation. Most respondents said they did not know what their monies were used for. Now, the release of the report comes on the heels of recent tax increases announced by government.
The research, which involved 24,000 respondents, revealed that most Ghanaians are aware of their tax obligations to the state. But the respondents said the cumbersome tax process deters them from compliance. The Revenue Authority, according to the survey, is also perceived as corrupt.
The Ghana Revenue Agency should do an introspection to take a look at themselves, to identify the loopholes that are in their own system, to be able to find out why people perceive them as corrupt. It may or may not be true, but the perception is there. So it's an opportunity for them to do an introspection and find out what is creating that perception and take steps to address whatever concerns there are there.
The Ghana Revenue Authority said it would study the report and take steps to address the concerns raised.
When people want to run away from the payments of tax, they will tell you, we don't know, we are not aware. But from this survey, it tells us that they know, but they intentionally say they don't know. So they are not being truthful. That is the only thing. So we need to be very careful now to go further than what we used to take it that, oh, they may not know. We won't take things for granted and then work better. Whatever loopholes that come up, I think my team of the research unit will look at it.
Stakeholders in a discussion after the release of the survey suggested the need to coordinate national data to help in revenue collection. They also called for more stakeholder consultations to restructure the tax system and also get more people to file their tax returns.
So the idea it is more of a chicken and egg problem. People think government do it and then I'll pay my taxes. Government on the other hand is pay your taxes and I'll provide you for the services. So the issue is people have kept paying, they are not seeing. Can we for once also start showcasing what the money is being used for to encourage them to pay up?
The report also called for increased education on the need to pay tax as well as reduce perceptions of inequality, which serves as a motivation for people to evade tax.
And the government high-level forum on the sustainability of the single-spine salary structure is in its second day, which is the last day to decide the way forward on the implementation of the pay policy. Right, and so joining me by telephone is Public Relations Officer of the Fair Wages and Salaries Commission, El Ankra. Hello, El.
Good afternoon. How are you doing?
I'm very well. I trust you're well too.
Yeah, I'm doing very well.
Right, you're in home. What's the state of discussions at the moment?
Well, momentum. That's the word I'll use for that. Momentum. We gathered today to bring together what different groups have been discussing. Yesterday, after the president left, the president made it clear that the single spine is not going to be taking it off. Taking it off is not an option. Organized labor also made it clear that the single spine is the way forward. Employers also made their position clear that the single spine is the best for this country. So after the departure of the president, we broke into different groups, and each of those groups were tasked with different subjects to treat with under the single spine pay policy. As one group dealing with sustainability, another group dealing with market premium and other allowances. There was another group dealing with linking pay to work and productivity. Two other groups, one with industrial differences, and then another group on establishing equity in salary administration. So all these groups have converged this morning, and we are sharing ideas, at the end of which we will come up with a communique.
Right. And one of the reasons we are having this is to find a way forward in sustaining the pay policy. With the end in view, what is the likely outcome of this two-day high-level forum?
Well, definitely, given what I have experienced this morning, the situation concerning the single spine pay policy will be totally different than it was before. What we are going to have is before who and after who. There's supposed to be some marked differences. You can see by the heat of the discussions going on that nobody wants to be a talk show. As in, we'll come.
Right.
We've held meetings, we've spoken, everybody has made presentations, and we're going back to sit on our part. That is not the spirit you get given the discussion, the momentum of the discussions going.
Right. Thank you very much, El. We'll get back to you for more updates. But let's go back to the court where we understand that Gloria Akufu, one of the lawyers for the petitioners, is on the floor. Let's take a listen.
Some of them fell outside the range that we established. Again, we had already established to the court what had happened to the NAMRI, and therefore, again, KPMG put that matter to rest. We think that substantially we have actually settled the matter. To say that somebody has a right to vote, and that in cancelling votes that are clearly invalid amounts to disenfranchisement, which is the case of the respondent, is clearly has no legal basis when it comes to the arguments. What does the Constitution say? The Constitution says that every Ghanaian citizen of 18 years old and of a sound mind has a right to vote, and then says also has a right to be registered. It then does not say anything about how these elections should be carried on, but gives the power to the Electoral Commission, the second respondent, to create laws through which elections will be carried on. Therefore, to be a citizen and to be of 18 years and of sound mind alone does not make a vote cast valid. It should have to come whether or not you have been registered, as prescribed by law that was enacted by the Electoral Commission. Those two alone, that is the qualification and registration alone, does not make a vote cast otherwise valid. It has to come with identification. The Electoral Commission, which has been given power by the Commission to make the rule, says that you can only vote if you go through biometric verification. If you cast a vote, and if the evidence is on the face of the pink sheet that you did not comply with all of this, then clearly an invalid vote has been cast, and therefore it ought to be set aside. And once these numbers, otherwise invalid votes, have been included in the declaration as admitted with Dr. Aferijan, the court ought to annul it. It has happened elsewhere. It can happen in Ghana. The only reason why the decisions have not been reversed in other jurisdictions is only because the number of votes they succeeded in setting aside were not enough to reverse it. In our case, in the case of those others, you had sometimes over 1 million, thousands of millions that they were not over. The difference between John Mahama's declared results, which we say is invalid, and Nanado is a little over 300,000. And if you take no signatures alone, that clearly gives Nanado the win, and he comes to the bottom.
Your counsel, Mr. Philip Addison, could not finish within 30 minutes. You're not worried, right?
No. I have said before that what we did today, if you have no evidence, or that the documents which form the foundation of your case, that is, your pleadings are not good, no matter what big English you come to speak, no matter how you were able to say within 30 minutes, that will not make your case. Besides, this is not the only opportunity to address the court. We have submitted written submissions to the court. The legal arguments alone cover 176 pages, supported by illustrative and explanatory tables, which are contained in 2 volumes, volumes 2A and 2B, which count to 1,600 pages. So our case, in our view, is already made, and this will not make the difference. I made this case before, and it's media. It's not simply possible to put a case that we have established before the court in 30 minutes. So it did not come to me as a surprise.
Many were those who thought that the 15-day count will begin from today. Unfortunately, you're going to come back again for addresses.
Well, that was the speculation, right? But it is for the court to determine. The law says that after proceedings are closed, effectively the proceedings are not closed yet. When the court said, come today and address us orally, proceedings are still going on. When the court says that we are adjourning to the 14th for you to come so we may ask things of you, because perhaps now they are looking at our addresses, proceedings have not closed. And the court has now indicated that after the 14th, then the 15 days will begin to run.
Many thanks.
You're welcome.
You're still watching our major briefing, and we just came back live from the Supreme Court. Let's move on to some other stories. Well, Ghana's capital, Accra, has been tipped to be the fastest growing city for Africa. Millionaires starting from the end of 2012 to the year 2020. According to the annual New World Wealth Update report, which was released on Monday, August 5, 2013, the number of millionaires in Accra is projected to grow by 8% a year. Now, that's interesting, but in Durban, South Africa, you would have the city growing. It would have the fastest growth in South Africa at 3.7%, while 7 other cities will grow millionaires faster than it. Johannesburg topped the list with 23,000 millionaires at the end of 2012, followed by Cairo with 12,000 millionaires, while Lagos had 9,800 millionaires. Now, the city of Lagos, Nigeria's commercial nerve center, currently ranks 3rd in the league of cities with the highest number of millionaires in Africa. A report by the Oxford-based World Consulting firm has noted. Now, this is really interesting report, if you ask me, and whether it's good news or not, we'll find out shortly. And so with me in the studio is development consultant Ebenezer Anoa Amma. Thank you very much for your time.
You're welcome. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you too. But I'm not. We'll come to this, but let's go back to the Supreme Court. You understand how important the Supreme Court hearing is today, the addresses, and so let's go back to the Supreme Court. And Nanacho Dazi, a member of the legal team for the NDC, is also on the floor. Let's take a listen.
Document, and that it was clear from Dr. Baumia's own cross-examination that in various cases you had to look at other material to justify some of the indication on the pink sheet. And in Dr. Baumia's own balance, the answer could be found in his analysis, which means that there's some document else you probably could have to look at. The respondents in unison did indicate that one key factor that they urged the court to look at is the fact that at all material times, agents of all the parties, including the petitioners, were present. That the count was made in public. 1, 2, 3. Everybody was there. 3. That there were no complaints from any of the agents. Out of the 26,002 polling stations, that there were no protests from any agent. It is in this regard that they claim that this election was very transparent and very clean. On the issue of overvoting, they said not a single witness was called in this case to come and establish that yes, somebody voted who was not entitled to vote, or somebody voted twice who was not entitled to vote more than 2 times. There was the issue of the serial numbers, where, like Mr. Chikata suggested, it was the weakest argument in a very weak case of the petitioners. He was actually quoting from the address of the second respondent, in that the whole question of serial numbers has been argued before this court, and they urged the court to accept. It's simply that serial numbers are not security numbers relating to election. They are not election matters. They are not like the ballot paper, which carries a serial number and the violation of which is central to the whole process. And for that matter, they described the serial number complaint as the weakest in an already weak case of the petitioners. But he indicated that the strange thing about the serial numbers is that the serial numbers are intended to void or affect almost 3 million out of the 4.6 or 5 million votes that the petitioners are asking to have set aside. 3 million or so of them are in the realm of serial numbers. And for that, they asked the court to dismiss that one out of hand, because serial numbers have nothing to do with the electoral process itself. And it is the petitioners, in concluding, were making some suggestions to the effect that the election of 2012 could not have been clean and was riddled with a lot of irregularities and violations. The answer from the petitioners, for the respondents, was very clear, in that this election of 2012 happens to be one of the cleanest elections.
Right, and so you're welcome back from the Supreme Court. Here in the studio is still the Joy News Briefing with me, Kemini Yamani Yamano. Before we went to the Supreme Court, we had Ebenezer Anua Amma. He is a development consultant on the issue of the fact that Accra has been tipped to be one of the fastest growing cities should be fastest growing city by 2020. We'll talk about Accra, but you've been following proceedings. What are your impressions on today?
Well, very good. I think most of us didn't expect that things would turn out this way, be inclusive. We were worried that the live telecast will bring untold hardship to our people because people would, will be under pressure and so on and so forth. But I think that for me as a person, it's been a tremendous learning experience. I've learned a bit more about the legal profession. And the amazing thing is that the lawyers, the legal profession, both sides, work with pride and dignity, that they've showcased their profession. And that has been interesting, right up from the bench, and the way they conducted themselves, It's been wonderful. And I think that Ghana is better off. We know much more about our own elections, and we know much more about the legal
How do you feel about the fact that we are nearing the end?
It's good. I would have wished that we've ended this thing long ago, but now at least we're getting to the end. I think they've taken the attempt to go through due process, and I believe that at the end of the day, Ghanaians will be very happy with whatever verdict comes out.
Absolutely. So let's talk about Accra now. Yes. According to the report, the report started from the end of 2012 and is projecting into 2020 based on the number of millionaires that seem to come into the country, or the city is able to accommodate. I have issues when it comes to report, but let me find out from you first. What do you make of this?
Well, as a Ghanaian, I think I'll be happy with that. As a development person, I have my own issues. You know what I mean? Wealth and development, I would assume that to the extent that people are developed, to that extent they are wealthy. Not necessarily in terms of the quantum of the wealth, but in terms of how accessible is that wealth to the generality of Ghanaians.
Right.
And if you look at the way people have defined development and wealth over a period of time, it has changed. Now, for those who think that development is historical and they've used social anthropology to explain it, what I mean is that they believe that the Western countries developed because they enslaved Africa, took our wealth away and took our people away, and they developed our back. And therefore, if we were going to develop, we need to be independent, and or go to other places and enslave them. But certainly people like Kwame Nkrumah at the time believed that the way to go was to become independent. So they led the effort. Ghana became independent and the rest of Africa. And you could see a certain trend of development coming into being in this country and wealth creation to that extent. That went on for a while. It didn't really last too long, and he was overthrown. But there are sociologists that have used change, for example. They say, look, it doesn't matter how much wealth you have. If the majority of your people don't have access to it, I think to agree with that. So, for example, they use the basic need approach. If we are developed and we are wealthy, do we have potable water, for example? Do we have access to electricity? Do we have access to health? I'll hold the view that if you give me a glass of clean water, you solve a lot of health-related problems. Why? Because a lot of the primary diseases in Africa, in Ghana, are either waterborne or water-related. For example, bilharzia, dysentery, cholera, etc., etc. So if you give me a glass of clean water, I think I'm healthy, and health is wealth, and that's the way I see wealth. So I would go by the social change approach, the basic need approach. Now, there are others who think that we need to have a good legal regime. So the lawyers will define development and wealth creation as people have equality before the law. Okay, so if you have an issue, I can go to court and have it resolved, and nobody will take things away from me. So as you can see, wealth creation, development means different things to different people. I still hold the view that it does not really matter the quantum of the wealth that we do have. What matters is that do we all have access to this wealth? Do we have electricity available to all of us? Health, education. How many of our people are really
what you're saying
educated?
is that the fact that we've been projected or we've been tipped to be a fastest growing city, starting from 2012, projecting into 2020, is not necessarily a reflection of how developed we are, even for the capital city alone.
I think it's a good thing. What I'm saying that we need to see that reflected in our lives. And this is where I believe the major players must all play their role very well. I'm talking about government, I'm talking about civil society, I'm talking about the private sector. If you look at these three and you liken them to the traditional stove, if you go to the village where you have maybe 3 stones arranged together with firewood in between them, and you put on the fire, put a cooking pot on it, each stone has a role to play. If you take up 1 stone and you have only 2 stones, you need to really have a certain skill to adjust the cooking pot and the 2 stones to enable it to cook.
And so how can we use this to our advantage?
So that's what I'm saying.
Right.
All the 3 actors must play their role. Government must govern and they must show leadership. We need to allow the private sector to also play a major role. So for example, if we are told that there's this project called the Hope City, and that about almost $10 billion or so dollars is going to come into this country. I mean, something like that of that nature. Now, can you imagine, the job is going to create incomes that will pay, and therefore the distribution of income. And that's what I believe in. See, many people have said, we'll build up our skills, we export, we make more money. If our exports are more than our imports, traditionally, then we're going to have more money. Ghana will be richer. And then, therefore, the private sector must also be encouraged to move on. And therefore, to the extent we have many more people creating that wealth, creating that money, and then finding a way to distribute it, to that extent, Ghana is really wealthy. To that extent, Accra is actually wealthy. But again, you can't take away the civil society, and they're playing a wonderful role. For example, look at the role they've played in our election petition. Major role. There are a lot of civil society organizations that are doing so well in this country. And what I'm saying is that if we're going to, beat our chests, and say that we are wealthy, all these 3 partners must work together. I'll be against a command and control economy. I'll be totally against it. I'll be totally against an entirely market economy where those who are strong and have money will rule. We need a balance.
Right. Usually when reports come out, it's either the report is a scare report, or it's just to boost your ego, even where it's not necessary. But I believe that when you look at the influx of some of these global businesses into the country, then you probably think that this report is something to go by. But is there a way we can use this information to advantage without necessarily waiting for all of these 3 important parts
actors.
3 important actors come together? Is there a way we can use this, even as individual business owners? Is there a way we can use this to advantage?
I think the report is very good. It's a very positive one. It gives an indication that Ghana is a preferred destination for business. And so Ghanaians must be confident enough to say that, look, we're going to take advantage of whatever environment we've created for ourselves and ensure that business really goes on. I mean, for me, as a Ghanaian, I'm extremely happy. All I'm going to tell ourselves, private people, that, hey, we can do it. Okay, let's be confident and do it. All I'm going to tell government is to be accountable to the people, use our resources appropriately, set up the enabling environment so that private business can also perform. Allow people to unleash their potential.
Right.
Now, what this report is saying is that we have the potential to be wealthy.
Yes.
We can be wealthy, but we need to do that by creating the environment and challenging ourselves, to take up private enterprise. And again, I want to challenge those in the civil society that we seem to be doing something right. You see, if you look at ourselves as Ghanaians, you'll be extremely sad.
Right.
But if you compare ourselves with others, even though we are moving so slow, and others are saying we are moving too slowly, we are not doing badly at all compared to others. So there's something that we're doing. Look, the lawyers, the judges, the legal profession needs to be up and doing. And I say kudos to what they've done. Let's create the environment that if people have problems, they can resort to the law court and have them resolved. We'd never kill ourselves. Even we yell at ourselves, we'll never kill ourselves. We'll put our ideas together and move on. Ghana can really make it.
Right.
I'm glad about this report. All I'm saying is that let all the three actors play their role and Ghana will be successful.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Eben, for your time today. Well, we've been talking to Ebenezer Anwar Amma. He is a development consultant. If we do it right, we can really achieve the title of the fastest growing city by 2020. In sports, preparations are far advanced for the second leg of the Kotoko Has Oldies at the Accra Sports Stadium. Team Kotoko won the first leg by 3-1 and will look to consolidate that scoreline to win the trophy. As stake lead organizer Dan Kweku Yeboah spoke to Joy Sports about the essence of this game.
It hardly happens, but as colleagues, I think that we have to put our heads together as a media and do some of these things, because you and I know that years back, football was played for fun. They were amateurs and they had nothing to gain for fighting for Ghana. We brag for winning the Nations Cup on 4 occasions, and it's because of the toils and the sacrifices of these our ex-footballers. So the situation of Ajimandua is unique, and we need to make sure we support this program so we could get something to support his cause.
In the first leg, I noticed that you were able to get a very large number of former Kotoko and Hearts of Oak players. What should we be looking forward to this time around?
Yeah, I think there's going to be an improvement. Stanley Abura, for instance, called a few days ago and said he wants to be part of the return leg, because in the first leg he wasn't part of it. It was excitement. Prince Polly, for instance, when he met Joe Debra, he just walked straight to us and said for 20 years he has not seen Joe Debra. So for us to give him the opportunity to interact with his former colleague, that alone was enough. So we're hoping that they will come in their numbers to make sure the occasion becomes a grand one.
Well, that's it for sports and also the ZAR. But before we go, a look at our headlines again. And Supreme Court adjourns sitting to August 14 after hearing addresses of parties of the election petition. Also, much ahead of the much-anticipated verdict, security agencies across the country embark on a street march exercise to assure the public of its preparedness to deal with possible outbreak of violence. MP for Nkwanta North, John Otibles, denies any wrongdoing in last week's riots that occurred in the area. The 2013 World Wealth Report tips Accra as Africa's fastest growing city by 2020. Thanks for your company. There's more news on myjoyonline.com. My name is Kimini Nyamani Amano. Goodbye.